Well, it's now my pleasure to cross to Reform UK leader Nigel Farage in London. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.
Thank you.
Now, you're about to announce a major coup for Reform UK to do with former Conservative Party donor Nick Candy. Now, many Australians here have probably only heard of Nick Candy because of his wife, Holly Valance, who used to be on Neighbours. But what does this appointment say about the evolution of reform that you are able to recruit rich tycoons like Nick Candy?
Yes, I mean, some newspaper reports say Holly Valance's husband becomes Reform Treasurer, so she's loved over. So don't think that she's just an Australian treasure. She's not. We've very much taken her to our hearts here as well. Nick has been an active member of the Conservative Party since 2009, a personal friend of Prime Ministers, Cabinet Ministers, a major party donor, someone that's raised millions of pounds for them. And I think Nick's just decided too many broken promises, open borders, crackpot net zero agenda, split down the middle. I mean, half of our Conservatives ought to be in Reform, and the other half ought to be with the Labour Party. That's how split they are. So no, for Nick to do this, it's a big move for him, and it says a lot about what I think is going on in the UK at the moment. And I believe, and all right, you may say, Nigel, you have a self-interest, but I actually believe that we are witnessing one of those once every 100-year moments when an established British political party gets obliterated and replaced by somebody else. That, I believe, is what's going on.
Well, look, it's going to be absolutely fascinating, but you're right. I mean, this is really great for Reform to get this. But this isn't the only good news for the party at the moment, because a recent nationwide poll in the UK has Reform ahead of the Labour government and only 2% behind the leading Conservatives. Nigel, firstly, what's your reaction? What do you make of this polling?
We've got the big M going with us. Momentum. It's happening. People are out there. They're talking at breakfast tables, in pubs. They're saying, you know what? Actually, the Conservatives broke all their promises. Labour are now breaking theirs. They're both as bad as each other. We need something fresh. We need something new. The truth is, Britain is broken. Nothing works. Our health service, our infrastructure, nothing works. And we're getting poorer. Of that, there is no question. Our society is breaking down, and we need something radical to turn this around. We need a dose of optimism, and that's what we're about. We believe this country can be turned around. We believe we can make things better. We believe we can encourage business, entrepreneurs, to make us all better off. And that's why we've got this big momentum. It's because we're optimistic about the future and everybody else is miserable and accepts gradual decline. We don't.
No, good on you. And this is all because of you, Nigel Farage. You've just been such a force for Reform. It's so good to see, even from the other side of the world. Now, look, I want to move on to a tricky area of sorts, the overthrow of the Assad dictatorship in Syria, because it presents quite a problem for Britain. And there is likely now to be a wave of refugees fleeing the country for Europe. And there will also, of course, be a lot of asylum claims. Nigel, a number of Brits went over to Syria to fight for the Islamic State. Are they going to come back to Britain once they are let out of jail, given that the rebels are letting these people out?
No, as far as I'm concerned, they left our state. They joined the Islamic State. I don't want a single one of them back. And this is the problem, that when you get boats crossing the English Channel, no doubt there are some people in those boats who are fleeing horror. I don't doubt that for a minute. But the problem is, and by the way, ISIS said this back in 2015. They said they would flood the continent of Europe with their operatives. Even if 1 in 1,000 that crosses into our port of Dover, if 1 in 1,000 is an ISIS activist intent on mayhem, intent on murder, intent on mass killing, then I'm sorry, we can't have anybody. Yes, we'll give food aid. Yes, we'll give medical aid. We'll help people around the world in genuine distress. We cannot open our borders and risk terrorism. And frankly, the first duty of government is to protect the nation and protect its people. We must not take that risk.
No, and I mean, you've already got a migrant crisis over there, and this is the last thing that you need. And what about the other way around, in light of the Syrians returning back home now? How many who sought asylum in Britain do you think will actually go back, or you think, no, they're done, they'll stay?
Well, we have a backlog of asylum claims from Syrians, including one who was publicly threatened to kill me repeatedly, which is very charming. He's currently in police custody. If the reason for claiming asylum was that Assad was in power, well, then surely it's time for them all to go home. And that is why lots of European countries yesterday, including us reluctantly in the end, have said, right, we're not processing any more of the existing claims, not taking any more new ones. Austria are even talking about returning people to Syria. Now, it's a complex situation. We don't know whether what comes will be even worse than Assad. But let's have some degree of optimism that people can go back. 14 million people in all have been displaced from Syria over the last decade. And for that country to prosper, it needs them to go back home.
Yeah, that's a really, really fair point. Nigel Farage, it's been wonderful to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening. Appreciate it.